Happy Friday. It is February 13th. A lot going on this week. We've got Valentine's Day this weekend. We're halfway through the session. President's Day, long weekend for some coming up. Utah's women's right to vote anniversary this week. So much to celebrate, so much to talk about. Maura Carabello with the Exoro Group is here. And also joining us, former state senator is Curt Bramble. I can't spit that out. Coming fresh off the hill to be with us today. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, good to be here.
Good to be here. And if you're one of our listeners who also watches as well, we are still working on the studio. It's getting better. So if you're watching, we've got new monitors, new lights. So hopefully it'll look less like a detective interview room where we're all in trouble. So we're headed in the right direction. For those of you listening, it's business as usual. I want to talk first real quick before we get to the legislative session, but the U.S. House approved the Save America Act as the GOP is making this a big election push. The question is, can they accomplish anything in the Senate, or is it already dead? This is Senator Mike Lee's bill that started as just the SAVE Act. He claims at this point, last time I checked, Maura, that he has 49 votes so far in the Senate. Obviously, they're dealing with the filibuster. They need 60. Does he have a snowball's chance of getting this, or is this a hard no?
I mean, he certainly has more momentum. It failed last year. It feels like it's got a little more momentum this year, but I don't think it's going to pass. I mean, that's sort of what is being signaled because of the filibuster in the Senate. It looks like it might fail.
Should it pass?
Well, I don't think so. I think that this is, so 21 million Americans will have a problem, born like straight up American, not a question of their Americanness, but don't have access to these records, including many women who never had their birth certificate sync up with their married name and things like that. Unintended consequences.
Are there that many people who don't have driver's licenses? Because in every state you go to, you have to provide that information to get your license. So are we talking about people who've just never gotten an ID?
21 million Americans.
That's a lot.
Who have this absence of. Also, I believe that any barrier to voting, which is an administrative barrier, doesn't really have a case for support in terms of why. I don't think this makes it more secure. Louisiana and Utah, actually, are the states that did the largest audits of their records to say, hey, how secure are our elections? I feel like the outcomes of those searches were like, yeah, our elections are very secure. It doesn't mean that you don't keep on it. You have to be vigilant about election security. I think this is thinly veiled voter oppression for me, from my point of view. And in part, it's because I don't think you can make a strong voter security case on this. So then the point is, why make it harder for a minimum of 10% of votable ages to make it harder? I mean, that just sort of feels obstructionist.
You know, there's another side to this, though. In Utah, I came to Utah December of 1972. Up until a couple of years ago, where we went to full mail-in balloting, you had to have a government-issued ID to vote.
Right.
Plain and simple. Yeah. And if the argument is, well, you're cutting 21 million people out from voting, the Democrat Party, Senator Ossoff in Georgia, to get into the Democrat convention, to actually have a voice in the process before you even get to an election, a far lower level of constitutional privilege, because voting is clearly a constitutional privilege, as is participating in the electoral process. Democrats require government-issued picture ID even to get into their convention. And so all the Democrats or the liberals that are claiming voter suppression, what are they doing with that same voice in the processes that give rise to what their platform is, what their positions are? And Utah was a poster child for requiring ID. It didn't suppress the women's vote. It didn't suppress the minority vote. And I think that's a red herring argument.
When we took away those measures, we saw 20 to 30% increase in average voter turnout. When you saw us move to a vote by mail system, of which we led the nation, and the Republicans here led this effort, you saw a tremendous increase, particularly in off-cycle elections.
Was that because it was easier and you had a ballot on your calendar?
So anything that makes it harder brings down the level of people voting.
I'll say this. I was the architect and the sponsor in 2005 with former Speaker Becky Lockhart, Senate Bill 227, the driving privilege card. At that time, the argument was, we've got to get rid of the driver's license for undocumented individuals because they are voting in our elections. We commissioned a legislative audit. They looked at, I don't know how many tens of thousands of records, and they found maybe there were 14, as I recall the data, there were 14 where it was questionable whether they were U.S. citizens. And of those 14, there was one that possibly voted, but they couldn't even determine that. So the issue of the arguments in favor of IDs, that it's going to stop individuals. Here in Utah, you had a regular driver's license, even if you're undocumented, up through from 1999 to 2005. That didn't give rise to any material voter access to the ballot from individuals that weren't citizens. I'll give you that. But today is different with this onslaught of undocumented individuals over the last, the Biden years. The millions of people that have come in, there has got to be a way to ensure integrity of the ballot box, and requiring ID is a way to do that.
There's no suggestion that whether you don't have documentation or not that you want to vote. I mean, that puts you on the grid, and so you don't see that behavior. We did just do an audit based on showing ID, and we didn't see any relationship between your documentation and trying to vote. Like, that wasn't a demographic group that was trying to get involved in voting in American elections.
Keep in mind, this is a federal bill.
Yeah.
Utah has been an anomaly in terms of our voting for decades. Yeah. And so to compare Utah and the Utah electoral process with what happens in Pennsylvania and New York and California and Maryland and Illinois, where there's been a concerted effort, particularly the sanctuary states, and for example, New York has openly declared that undocumented individuals have a right to vote in certain elections. That gives pause to the average American, and it resonates. The polling, nationwide, the polling, both Republican, Democrat, liberal, and conservative,
well, you would still control local elections, regardless of what a federal piece of legislation, because as you know, they are still state controlled.
Sure. But
and to pull on that ideological stream, I would think Utah would love to disenfranchise themselves from a federal bill, because we've lived under states' rights. And so, I'd say reject then the federalism of this.
Is part of this an issue? I'm wondering if it's not just people who they want to make sure that legal American citizens are voting, but also ballot harvesting, because while it's been easier now to vote if you've got a ballot on your countertop, it's probably easier to steal ballots too out of mailboxes and harvest if you're going to like an old folks home, or you're going to other vulnerable people and steal their ballots and vote for them without a license, I guess, or some kind of ID.
But the whataboutism is what is kicking our butt in this. There isn't any but what about. Yes, what about? What about if someone was printing their own ballots in their basement? What about? It's not happening. Voter fraud happens, and we have things in place, and we should be vigilant about voter fraud. But this bill does not focus on the weak points in voter fraud.
Well, the argument that 21 million people are disenfranchised, if they're disenfranchised because they need to show an ID to vote, they're being disenfranchised by the Democrat Party to even participate in party activities, because if you can't show an ID, you can't get in.
Well, that happens in Utah for the Republicans. As you know, the Republicans have a close caucus. 2 cycles ago, they started asking for ID. The Democratic Party in the state of Utah is an open ballot party in which you can be a Republican and unaffiliated, or a Democrat and still participate in the elections in Utah.
Actually, that occurred in 2003. It didn't just happen about closed Republican
the
only
closed
primary.
Republican, the ID portion. So the Republicans required you to be a registered Republican. But I'm just saying, if your argument here is that the Democrats in another state, which I think they shouldn't do, I'm with you on this. I don't think primaries should be closed. I don't think party participation should be closed. I don't think it should require an identification.
Are you aware the original Senate Bill 54 would have statutorily required, just like many states, and what Utah's standard was before 2004, before 2003,
right?
Utah, anyone that was registered to vote, you'd go into the polling place, you'd choose a Republican ballot or a Democrat ballot. The original Senate bill, the original language of Senate Bill 54 that I was a sponsor of, had unaffiliated voters being able to vote in a primary. Like had occurred, the courts overturned that.
That's right. I remember that, and I was for that ability. And since then, we got rid of the straight ticket orientation of the ballot.
I was the sponsor with Patrice Arent on getting rid of straight party line voting. Right. So I've got credentials on both sides of this argument, but still the premise that requiring someone to show that they have a government ID issued as an American to exercise a franchise to vote, the overwhelming majority of Republicans, the overwhelming majority of Democrats, national polling on both sides of the aisle and among unaffiliated agree with that position.
I would just like, as this debate continues, no matter how they vote, that we don't talk down to women, because a lot of times when I'm seeing these tweets from congressional members, they're talking like women are morons and you can't figure out how to change your name. And I'm like, people have been changing their name for a long time and trying to figure this out. So let's talk about the real numbers and what people might not have and how we can help them in this debate. But I don't know that we should just be like, well, women don't know what to do and they don't know how to change their last name, because most people have been doing that for a long time, right?
I've not heard that, nor that's offensive. I mean, it's offensive that someone would speak down to women like that. I think that the issue of having an ID, women can get it, men can get it. And I frankly, as a transplant to Utah, coming from born in Chicago, I applaud that Utah holds the position of the first women voting in the nation. I think that's great.
High five. Yes. In the midst of the polygamy, the women were like, do you know what we need? The right to vote. So
and
high five
so
for
we
that.
can vote for polygamy.
So we can vote.
Just to be clear. Just to be clear the reason we did it.
There was some mushy time there in
It was a
between.
little confusing
Yes.
about why we did it.
And the
but-
first female legislator, Martha Hughes Cannon,
Right,
she
beat
actually
her husband.
she defeated her husband in the contest.
Guess who was not the favorite wife after that? Martha Hughes Cannon, probably.
True.
All right, let's talk about some Utah issues. You brought up the driver's amendment that's coming up right now. We do have driving privilege cards here in the state of Utah. There's bills on multiple factions. Some people want to get rid of it, and they don't want people who are here in the country illegally to drive at all. This one, though, is wanting to make sure that people have the driver's privilege cards, and if not, that their car gets impounded. The idea is that apparently we're having more and more crashes that are caused by people, whether they're young people who just don't have their licenses, people who are in the state illegally and don't have driver's privilege cars, and then they have a propensity to run from these crashes, maybe not stay there, they don't have insurance. What should the state be doing on this?
I'll take a shot at this. I actually support this. Representative McPherson, he says you have to have a license, driver's privilege card, or a learner's permit, and if you don't, your vehicle could be impounded if you're stopped without that. I think that's good public policy.
So I'm mixed on this. So I the way I read this bill is that under current law, law enforcement has the discretion to impound. It's you're impoundable now, but it's triggered.
So they can, but don't?
It's triggered. Well, they do often.
Sometimes.
But it's the choice of the law enforcement officer. It moves the fee from $450 to $600. This mandates that law enforcement has to impound it, and I'm not sure of the efficacy. I agree that with the goal, like this makes sense, and so I want to make sure I'm not indicting the goal. And a lot of times the question is, did we write this in a way that's not just adding complexity to statute? That's one thing that Senator Bramble did well, is you often had a good idea, but you also didn't want just more law. And so my question is, great idea. Is this just more law? Because right now, law enforcement has the ability to impound if they want. I'm comfortable with that being a discretionary choice of law enforcement, because there are circumstances, including someone has said they'll they'll come pick up the car. Clearly, if it's intentional or if it's associated with DUI, I think my common sense would tell me most of the time this is someone whose car should be impounded. But I don't know. There might be a time that it doesn't need to be. And in that instances, I would like to leave it up to law enforcement. So from my sense, this just makes it mandatory that it's impounded, and it just makes the fees higher, which I feel like target a group of people. And the problem with this in terms of efficacy is what we do know is punishment doesn't eliminate the crime. And if punishment eliminated crime, we'd all be doing a lot better. But we're not seeing nationally about 18% of crashes are caused by people who don't have licenses. McPherson quoted an extraordinary number in West Valley. I'm going to get it wrong, but he said around 30%, I think, is what he saw in West Valley, which is an amazingly high number.
Yeah.
And West Valley might want to look at why there's this twice the average.
Let me give another perspective that applies here. In Moab, the Petito case, where the family is now suing because the police didn't do enough. So imagine a scenario. You have an individual driving a vehicle not licensed. Law enforcement doesn't impound the vehicle. Then that person takes that same vehicle unlicensed and goes and kills your child.
Yeah, my understanding is they're taking action and that they have legal recourse and they're following legal recourse. So it didn't lack legal recourse for it.
No. My point is that if the issue is law enforcement discretion, this makes it clear that if you're driving a vehicle and you're not licensed, don't have a driving privilege card or a learner's permit, the vehicle's impounded, that stops the potential or this discretion, which gives public liability to the officer or the department that lets the individual off, lets them continue driving the vehicle, drives away, and then uses that vehicle in a vehicle homicide or an accident or whatever. And I use that example of Petito, where they're claiming that law enforcement didn't do enough to protect the victims. And if you don't do this, is law enforcement doing enough if subsequent, unknown at the time, but subsequent events play out where that unlicensed individual uses that vehicle or drives that vehicle where there's people that lose their lives or people that are maimed for life or whatever. So for those reasons, I would err on the side of taking that vehicle off the road and letting it work out through the courts, because the downside is so potentially devastating.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's an equal amount of unintended consequences by impounding. So I think that more law isn't more law in this instance, and I think this is a common growing trend that I'm seeing surprisingly among Republicans, in which I think that there's bigger and bigger. This is, for me, just bigger government. These teeth already are in place. You can already rely on doing this. If you want this to happen, petition your local law enforcement agency. The law allows for impounding now. It just allows for the discretion of the officer. And certainly there will be some instances, as there are in every law, in which you wish it was written. But I think this is, once again, more laws from the state telling local jurisdictions how to do their job. So while I agree with the goal, I don't think this is how to get there.
This couldn't be more government. These are two conservative Republicans.
It's mandated.
They want less government.
No, I don't need the brand anymore, because I'm starting to look at what they're doing. And we have 950 current active laws that are drafted. Do not tell me we're a small government state anymore. You guys are cranking out laws like they're going out of business.
Last year, and this year I'm like 900.
We're blue past 900, and then you want to tell me that you're for small government. Well, more laws is not small government.
I was being facetious.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about another one. So that one is the stick.
But that was a good button to push, wasn't it?
Yeah, there you go.
Pushed it.
So there's a little carrot and stick action going on at the legislative session. That one's the stick, where they want to ground you and put you in timeout. Now I want to talk about a carrot issue where there's a bill that wants to remove marriage tax penalties. This new bill would limit tax credits for non-married individuals in an attempt to incentivize marriage. Right now, Utah has the top rate of two-parent households in the country, but right now, as we're seeing it across the country, that number is falling. So this bill would increase the child tax credit to include families making up to $61,000. Maura, can we incentivize people to get married, have children, and
it was an interesting premise for me. Like, it was an interesting premise that my final decision to marry would be based on tax credits. So maybe I was viewing marriage the wrong way. You were from the get-go.
Looking at it wrong.
I'm going to review why. So,
are they cute? Are they nice? Can they support me?
But what is the tax advantage? So, I mean, I do think that the reason that we have so many two-parent homes probably has less to do with the tax code than it does to do with our cultural values. And so again, I'm gonna take my small government theme and say, like, again, while I don't dislike, I do dislike this. I do dislike I know you can show studies about how kids and family units, and certainly the economy, is served by two full-time working adults. But we are just treading so much into personal engineering of personal decisions, and that's not my jam. And like, so for me, I'm like, no, just I'll buy the kid thing. I will even buy that for all of you who are sicking with 5, 6, 7, 8 kids. I'll go with you. I'll keep disproportionately paying into the education system because I have such a strong sense of community, but I don't like as a motivator for you to indicate cultural norms to be an indicator. Although, again, I understand the benefits of a two-adult household when it comes to really making strong communities. I don't want it incentivized with my taxes, although it already is.
As a 40-year tax professional,
yeah.
I understand what they're trying to do here, but keep in mind there is another downside to this. If you're head of household, that means that you have a dependent child that you're caring for, and it's kind of a hybrid between single taxpayer that has the highest tax bracket, married filing joint that has the lowest tax bracket, or married filing separate is the same as basically single. But if you're head of household, you get, under the current law, there's you get a little better tax break because of having to be the primary support for a dependent child. And so that's not talked much about in this debate, because what it does, it removes the head of household credit, puts it the same as single, because a head of household is a single person. If you read the bill,
so that's where the credit comes.
That's where the credit comes in. And so on one hand, we're incentivizing marriage, which is good. Philosophically, I can say, I could get my arms around that. But at the same time, what do you do with that single parent who is motivated to care or to provide for that child as a head of household? So there's two sides to this particular issue.
I'm going to be honest. I'm thinking about having babies right now because I don't have any dependents at home anymore, and I miss the tax break. So for the tax break, I'm going to have some babies.
That's good. That's nice.
It might be expensive.
My-
It might be expensive in the long run. I'll be 90 when they graduate from high school. I'll be like, but kids, I got a tax break.
That was the sole reason my wife and I had 6 kids, okay?
The tax break.
The tax break.
They kept
You were an
rolling in
accountant
for
and you were-
years. I love that.
Well, if I were to actually confess why we got them, we fly hot air balloons, and it's so hard to find qualified crew, we had to grow them.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not a bad idea. You got the whole team ready to go. Well, after you have your babies, they eventually go to school. So this was a bill I wanted to talk about last week, but we ran out of time. The question is whether third graders that are struggling to read, and the governor made it a priority in his State of the State address to talk about how too many third graders are not reading on grade level. So the question is, should we be holding those students back? I started with my daughter when she was in kindergarten in Utah. We moved to Florida, and when I got to Florida, I had an interesting experience there where I was helping in a third grade classroom, and it was, I think, a Renaissance feast, and one of the kids hung back and was like, I'll help. And I'm like, no, go do whatever the Renaissance activity was, chopping each other up with swords or whatever. I'll set the table. But she's like, oh, this is my third Renaissance feast. I'm fine. I'll help you set the table. And I was like, oh, okay, we hold kids back here. So states have different ways of doing it. Utah just generally, you graduate to the next grade and move on. In other states, they're serious about holding them back. The question is, which hurts or helps kids more? Maura, should we think about holding kids back here in Utah, or should we progress them along?
So this third grade marker is a really big deal, and we all agree on that. That adage that until third grade you're learning to read, and after third grade you're reading to learn. And so it's this mark that it seems really, really important. My concern with this bill is that it punishes the child for not learning, the stigma that they will feel about being held back, and what that tells them about being stupid, and what that tells them about not learning. I'm concerned with what that does to the whole child. And there are children who go through a more holistic review of their academics and are held back. This would be a single review based on learning. I won't disagree that that's probably what that learning indicator says, but what I would like to see is earlier intervention, earlier targeted support that makes it so the child isn't bearing the burden of not reading at grade level. The other interesting thing is when you read the bill, they talk a lot about where that advantage comes in is it at home. Kids who have supplemental
reading minutes at night.
And how much that makes a difference. And so I look and say, well, can we start some supplemental reading programs? I'm not looking to want to just grow programs and services, but I think we look at these kids and ask ourselves, why Utah? We set out a goal. Girl will remember better when Education First. That goal was about 10 years old.
Olene Walker. That was her major thing when she became governor. When when Mike Leavitt was appointed as administrator of the EPA, Olene Walker became the first female governor of Utah. Her reading initiative almost caused meltdown in the 2000, I believe it was 2004 legislative session.
It was that long ago,
Yeah, it was 2004 because she wanted $30 million for reading initiatives, and it was that we had this tension between the branches. The question on this, okay, so Mississippi had great progress. They moved from 51st to 40th. I would ask the question, where are the top 10 states? What are they doing? There are several bills up this year on educational accountability, particularly for the Utah Fits All and the Open Ed and those kinds of programs. Where is the accountability for the professionals the teachers in the classroom to make certain that they're doing their job, as well as you've got the parents. And look, our 6 children all matriculated in public ed. We could have put them in private schools or homeschooled. We believe, my wife and I believe, that the social intercourse, the involvement with kids from all backgrounds or whatever was very positive, okay? The public education system needs to take a critical, introspective look and say, why are we having trouble with kids in the 3rd grade? Whether it's teaching methods or programs, it's, I think, more holistic than just saying, I agree with you, Maura, that might sound strange, but holding kids back and that stigma and having that one metric, I'm not sure that that's in the best interest of the child, but where has the education community and the teaching profession, where have they been, and what's the difference between the top 10 states in the country on reading proficiency for 3rd graders versus what we're doing in Utah? Could we learn from that as opposed to this rather more draconian, heavy-handed for the kids?
I agree. We can find programs and accountability that can get our kids there. So let's focus on knowing what those are for Utah.
I'm wondering, and maybe this doesn't make a difference at all because it's just more time in the classroom, not at home reading with your parents, but I'm wondering if the full-day kindergarten at all is going to be helping as we've kind of moved from half day to whole day, if that gives kids more opportunity to read or not, or if that helps. But it's probably hard to get data on that since it's sort of new here in the state of Utah. But we will pay close attention to that. I know all parents care about that. And once your kids click, it's kind of fun when you watch them learn to read.
Yeah.
It happens, and then they're like, got this.
That was the hope. I had the privilege of being the Senate sponsor of the extended day kindergarten for at-risk kids. That was the first step towards what we call now all-day kindergarten. The hope was that would give those kids that are at risk or whatever, would give them a boost in terms of their academic progress.
Talking now about one of the top issues for Republicans in the legislature, and House Speaker Mike Schultz talking a lot about this, but Constitutional Court 3-judge panel bill is taking on some new amendments. So the judiciary is definitely in the spotlight. The Senate recently made changes to the bill regarding constitutional court, so now it needs to pass on a concurrent vote in the House before it goes to the governor. House Bill 392 originally was set a 3-judge court to hear only challenges to Utah's constitution, then swapped it out on the House floor to set up this 3-judge panel to hear any civil challenge. Is this a good move? Are these judiciary moves what you'd like to see happening, or is there too much heavy-handedness from the legislature trying to tell the judiciary how to do their job right now?
I think you'd have to ask Judge Gibson that question.
Judiciary job. It's hard to spit that out.
Or Chief Justice Durant. Look, I actually agree with the premise that if you're talking about a constitutional issue, I think there's some merit to having a panel made up of 3 justices to look if something's constitutional, because we're seeing this across the country, not just in Utah, where you have a district court judge, one judge declaring something unconstitutional. Then when it goes up to the appellate level or to the Supreme Court level, we're seeing those the one judge rulings regularly being overturned. So I think there is some merit on it. If you look at the civil challenge, it's not just any civil challenge. It could be any civil challenge, but it does have to pass through either the Attorney General, the Governor, or the legislature to say this particular case, civil case, rises to the level of wanting to look at a 3-judge panel. I would think that may give, whether the judiciary agrees with this or not is up to them, but I think it may give a little more inertia to the decisions that are handed down, particularly the controversial ones. I joked about Judge Gibson, and I don't know whether her decision will be upheld or not, either at the state level or there's now some federal litigation pending. I think it would be a stronger case if that were done by a panel of judges rather than one judge.
I just have a hard time as seeing either version of this bill as anything but retribution for what the courts are doing and just the general legislative umbrage about being challenged. One of the things I would say when it was written as a constitutional panel, I agree with how many of these appeals we're having and how slow they make some processes. The one flaw, I think, in the legislative process is that the legislature a dozen years ago took away a constitutional note on a bill. So I would suggest if the legislature cared that much about the origin of the Constitution and whether it reflect our statute or not, an act of good faith would be for them to also run their bills past a constitutional screen, which we no longer do. So I'm like, if you cared that much about constitutionality, you would embed it within the legislative process, as well as wanting to add an extra layer to those experts who studied law for a living. But this bill took a right-hand turn and does just deal with civil and now doesn't address constitutionality.
Keep in mind those constitutional notes. This was during my tenure in the Senate.
Yeah, I know.
Those were based on one attorney's opinion.
Well, all legislation is based on one writing of one leg counsel. That's the genesis.
Well, that's where bills come from. One person writes the bill.
I would be happy for them to have a 3-panel screening for their constitutional notes if they'd like to put those back on bills.
It was not judges that it was an attorney, and we found that the concern was that partisanship was filtering in to those notes.
But I do find it ironic that you don't feel that the legislature doesn't feel like it needs a constitutional screen, and yet suddenly it's concerned that the legal community needs a constitutional screen. But our 104 lay legislators, they're intuitive about the Constitution, and rather the judiciary is somehow muddled about it. But this didn't take that turn. This takes the turn of a civil screen.
Legislative Research and General Counsel still advises legislators.
Right, but it's no longer required in the bill.
It's no longer made public is the difference.
No, the difference is if it's not public, it's not required, right? What you do in private isn't part of the public process. And so this took a turn and says it's civil. The one interesting thing is, I agree with Curt, I just agree with the outcome. It says now you have to filter it through an elected official. So this protects the power of those statewide electeds.
So that was the AG, the governor of the legislature, were the filters.
So now you have to screen it back to those bodies, namely the legislature. And so if you look at the shift in power, it's pretty easy to see. If you're a legislature, you might be for this shift in power. I would say as an individual citizen, I'm not for this shift in power. I don't need the additional screening. I'm fine, particularly on civil action. It's more complicated for me actually on constitutional action, but now that this just addresses civil action, I in fact don't find it appealing to me as a citizen to have this now re-screened by an elected official who does have a partisan point of view and in a supermajority, which I know will have the flavor of a partisan outcome.
I think what this demonstrates is the inherent tension between the 3 separate but equal branches, and I think the legislature is concerned that the judiciary has taken some extraordinary privilege on some of the recent rulings, whether you agree with them or not, that the process needs to be refined to have a little greater credibility with those decisions that are being handed down that have such broad impact. Redistricting is the poster child for this.
Yeah, and I would suggest that is exactly how I see it, except that I see the overreach happening by the legislature, not the judiciary.
Well, of course you do.
No, but I mean, like, that's what's interesting about it is that if the pie is cut in third, which it's not, is that sort of who overstepped and had more.
The challenge is 3 separate but equal, but the judiciary wants to be first among equals.
I don't see that. I see the legislature is continuing to not only do this to the judiciary. They got done beating up the executive branch, and they didn't give up much of a fight. So now they own most of the levers of power from the executive branch, which has been happening for a decade. And now they're setting their eyes on the judiciary. And they only had these concerns when the judiciary tried to rein in their power. Prior to that, we were all good to go with it. And it's not coincidental that now we have this deep soul searching about balance of power when they disagree with the legislature.
You apparently reject the notion that the very nature of the legislature is the voice of the people in our 3
I don't reject it at all. I just read the whole Constitution, and I know that political power is inherent to the people in the state of Utah. I think there's a call and response in our Constitution. I don't think that beyond writing the law, I think you are public servants. I think it's important that elected officials understand that they are serving the will of the people. They are not controlling the will of the people.
I agree with you that all power rests with the people, but that's not the whole story. All power rests with the people through their elected representatives in a compound constitutional republic, and it's expressing that the power of the voice of the people through the legislative process that what this is all about.
Until you talk about direct constitutionally appointed initiatives in which there are carve-outs for the direct conversation with the public about lawmaking, which is why the Constitution 4 years after statehood codified it. And that's what's the beauty of Utah's law, is that it has a direct voice that is used very, very rarely, and rightly so by the legislature, enormously burdened in terms of getting to the ballot there, as the GOP will tell you this year. But it also allows for it. And then it says, by and large, yes, your representational government is the power.
So you support the voice of the people on whether they really believe Proposition 4 should be the law of the land.
I believe it is theirs to choose whether to put it on the ballot or not. Which is what the exercise is right now. Do you want to put this on your ballot? And apparently we don't.
So far not. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. I want to talk about another issue that I think has gotten a lot of steam in the last year or two. If people have been talking about digital ID, I guess if you want to vote and you have your ID on your phone, how easy would that be to just show up and show them your phone? There have been questions about how secure this is, if it turns into a China-esque thing where all of a sudden your digital ID becomes a social thing where they're tracking how quickly you go to work, if you're on time, if you're a nice person, and then do you earn good points with the government. So Utah wants a digital bill of rights, and they say this could lead the nation to privacy. This is sponsored by Senator Curt Bramble. So the question is, are we ready for these digital IDs? Does the government know everything about us right now? Or should we say, hold up, we're not ready for this yet?
No, the government has to ask Amazon everything about us right now.
That's right. They're the ones who know.
Yeah, they're the ones that know.
And we've told them.
And look, anyone that travels, I travel extensively for my business. And you walk into an airport, you don't even need a boarding pass anymore, whether you like it or not.
They scanned your face on the way in, homie.
They did. Yeah. And whether you like it or not, virtually every car we drive right now has a black box, and somebody knows how you're driving, okay? What this does, this puts in some guardrails, which I think I agree with Senator Cullimore. The guardrails are necessary. I think the idea that Utah is on the cutting edge of this is pretty cool.
I see this the same way Curt does. I think this is not deciding to do it. This is saying guardrails about how it's going to happen to us. The other thing is it's been thoughtfully rolled out. It had a pilot program. This is a follow-up to the pilot program. And the testing was, what are the guardrails? How will we use this? And importantly, for those who are concerned, this is still an opt-in. It's not mandated.
Right.
We choose to do it. And it is happening. So I like that the state is saying, well, we're going to pay attention and we're going to protect our citizens and we're going to be thoughtful and considerate. The one thing I will say, I didn't do the test because I was lazy, but Chris, my husband, did the test.
He did, okay.
It's really hokey looking. Like, we need to up our game. Like,
so it didn't look like a real license?
He showed it to me, and I was like, what is that? I'm like, what is that? And he said, it's my state ID. And I'm like, okay. I know I was a pilot. And then I looked, Colorado's had this actually for a couple of years. And so I was having lunch here with my cousin, who actually was not allowed to use her digital ID. It was interesting. We don't have reciprocity yet. And hers looked like her driver's license. Chris's looked like some kind of Chuck E. Cheese bingo card. So I'm like, I just want us to, that's my only request, that we will get better. It was just a pilot program.
Okay, they have AI that could help them. This is the rule that came from last year's bill from Cullimore. It said it declared that identity belongs specifically to the individual, not the state. It embedded strong privacy and anti-surveillance guardrails into the statute. It also required study and stakeholder consultation. So Chuck E. Cheese upgrade needed. I've been thinking a lot about what people know about us this week, and this is not political, but we've been looking at the Nancy Guthrie search and how they initially said, oh, we can't get anything off those doorbell cameras because we don't have the subscription. Well, what we're learning now is it may take them longer to get, but everything you do, whether it's in your cameras, your phone, it's getting uploaded to a giant data center somewhere and they can find it. We're being watched at all times. And there was that commercial in the Super Bowl. I don't know if you guys saw it. There's been some outcry over with where the Ring doorbell cameras will look at the lost dog signs and then actively search for your dog. So
I didn't see
you
that.
missed that? Yeah. Some people were pretty upset about it. And Amazon, I think, was a partner on this. And Amazon decided to drop it because, yes. So anyhow, if you have a lost dog, they are not going to actively use their cameras to search for it right now. Or if they are, they're not going to tell you about it.
Look, anyone that has a cell phone of any kind.
Yeah.
They know everything.
The cell phones are on, even when they're off, they're on listening. And so you open your phone, and all of a sudden you get a pop-up ad for something that
You were
had
just talking about.
You're just talking about. That's just pure coincidence, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I know everybody thought that was fake 10 years ago. Now we're like, okay, that happens. I actually saw, on totally off topic, some research that was being done by people, because if you leave your phone on the Hey Siri, if it's an Apple phone, I'm not sure about Android, but it's always listening to you. So if you sleep with your phone in the room, people use it for sleep studies to know how often you're waking up at night. Do you snore? Are you having intimate relations? They know everything because the phone is listening. So
Heidi looked at me because I am the black sheep.
You
In
are
my
the black
family,
sheep. She's the Android.
I'm
Does
a
your
black
phone
sheep
listen
at
to
work.
you?
No.
What's an Android?
I'll later show. I'll
Isn't
do a
there
show
some
and
dumb
tell.
bill in the legislature about that, where the state's picking its state flower or phone?
I think we need to have a state phone, a state operating system.
I know. I will join the rest of the world.
Hey,
and
you know
leave
what's sad
Utah
about
to Apple.
that? I can't stand the Apple operating system on a Mac, or
But you love your phone.
but I love the
Yeah.
iPhone.
Yeah, I hear that.
And
I
I've
hear
never
that
used a
among-
Mac. My kids do, and so yeah.
Listen, I'm still in counseling from when I lost my BlackBerry. Okay,
I will join you in that. I don't like the change.
You don't like
it? Just takes too long.
It's hard to have new things. One quick mention here: Utah had a bill in the legislative session last year, I believe, that made it so that Chinese or foreign companies couldn't be owning property, especially in Utah that's next to important sites. The governor made an announcement yesterday that a Chinese-owned company or partially owned company had to sell off their Tooele County motor sports park because it had such. It was in a close area next to, what is that called? My brain is not thinking. What is, we blow bombs up in the ground in
there's a
Dugway Proving Grounds. I'm like, what do we call that? This is like Friday brain.
Charades.
We're playing charades. Act it out for me. Pretend you're blowing stuff up in the dirt. So that announcement was made. They all have a new buyer at this point right now. Is this important, or is this showmanship, Maura?
I will just requote
You
Governor
will.
Cox.
Okay, we've got it
That's
here.
exactly why these types of laws were actually mattered. I think this is an important law. I think that's important. We're paying more attention to it right now.
And I think it's a good law. What's interesting is while this had to do with Chinese ownership of real estate near a military installation, Dugway
Yes.
Proving Grounds, and we've seen that across the country. Fully support that. Had I been in the Senate, I would have voted for Representative Perucci's bill when she ran it. At the same time, we somehow are demonizing the ongoing ability of at the subnational state level, the idea. Utah was the very first state in the nation to have a formal cooperative agreement with a province in China, the Liaoning province. That's the province that borders North Korea. I had a privilege of leading the very first delegation to China. I've been to China, I think, 15 or 17 times. I agree with this policy, but I also believe that people to people, having exchanges, trying to continue to gain a better understanding of other cultures, their government, their processes or whatever, is critical to America's future. And I don't think we should throw everything out as it relates to China, but I think this is good policy.
And I really appreciate that distinction because it allows us to think dimensionally about these.
I'd rather do it across a dinner table or across a conference table than at the point of a spear.
And even then there's room for the next discussion, which is shared business ventures and what they look like,
and that's
which is also a little different.
That's exactly what Governor Cox said when he talked about this, that this doesn't mean that we shouldn't have ongoing involvement with individuals from China or even the Chinese government, but they need to be within their appropriate guardrails.
Yeah,
and
this
in
is
Utah,
all
we have a list.
Yeah,
of those.
and this is all countries you're looking at. When you think about it, a lot of these conversations started not necessarily because of military bases, but people started looking at how much farmland we had in the U.S. and who it was owned by. And if you want to sit down at the dinner table, you want to make sure that American families can feed themselves. And if at some point you've sold off all of your farmland to other countries and they have control of that at some point, it may become problematic in being able to feed yourselves, because if you're hungry, then nothing else matters.
Utah's law refers to China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia.
So
Don't buy our farmland.
is that the axis of evil? I forget who's involved in the axis of owning bad land.
Was Russia in the axis of evil during the
No.
Bush years? I don't remember.
I don't think so. I think they were in their own naughty group. I want to go over some of the signature gathering that's been going across the state. We have some wins and some losses. The Salt Lake County tax referendum, where they were trying to make it so the Salt Lake County Council and the mayor could not be raising your taxes, failed. And it really failed hard. So that came in this week. We're also looking at the Prop 4 repeal signature gathering that's going on. This is literally the 11th hour for them. I believe that last week Rob Axon said that they're going to be opening the offices on Sunday, which is interesting in government positions, and especially here in Utah, that on Sunday they'll be accepting those signatures. So their final push is happening right now. And Ben McAdams says he is the first to the finish line. I did not have time to double check him on that, but he's got the 7,000 signatures to make it onto the ballot. So he's the first one in the new D1 district. Maura, overall, looking at signatures, thoughts? Got a lot going on.
I don't think that Prop 4 is going to make it. They're right up against the deadline, and these things get harder and harder. The other thing is how relatively successful, although the numbers are never big, the repeal has been. I haven't heard yet if the repeal is showing up in targeted areas. So one of the things that's interesting, I know the biggest amount of repeal was in Salt Lake County, but the numbers in Salt Lake County are so big. When you're doing the distribution, the trick is, like, we would always over distribute by 2 Senate districts, because if I'm just squeezing by in Millard County by 86 votes, and if you were someone who wanted to foil that, you would go get 89 votes in Millard County over trying to get 2,500 in.
It's 26 out of 29 Senate districts, not counties.
No, I'm saying in the Senate district you're in, you gather by county. I mean, you gather. That's sort of where you operationalize. So
you have better luck going to a smaller county and just getting fewer.
Well, no, marginal counties. Okay. So you're also just looking. So I don't know. I assume Better Boundaries or whomever is leading the appeal, but it doesn't look like they're going to meet their threshold either way.
My point was Millard County happens to be in a Senate district that has Millard and Juab, and
their threshold number is really manageable, is what I'm saying. So you look when you're operationalizing these, you do it per population center, regardless of whether the Senate district is, right. The Senate district was a different construct to get to harder margins because the political jurisdiction's more complicated, to your point. And so I think that the repeal is looking pretty successful in some of those. They were struggling with their distribution to start with. They were struggling with their...
Inherently, they're going to struggle. The standard is 26 out of 29 Senate districts meeting the threshold of the signatures. Right. There's only 23 Republican Senate districts in the state. There are 6 Democrat Senate districts.
I mean, the advantage is to the Republicans. I just want to be clear, because Rob sort of said this. So I've ran more statewide ballot measures than anyone in initiatives. Let me tell you, listening to the GOP whine about how hard it is, it's a little New Year's gift for me. I'm like, really?
Them to feel your
is
pain?
It hard? Is this really cumbersome? And I mean, the advantage... This sort of political advantage is clearly with the Republicans. I think what they're finding is there just isn't the appetite. That the people are less partisan than the politicians are.
If I disagree with the initiative, the process, whatever the language is, the process isn't hard enough. If I agree with the initiative, the process is too hard.
That's exactly right.
Let's lay it out.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and Better Boundaries is already working on it. I think I saw a headline that about 2,000 people had already taken their signatures off in the last week, and they'll have their effort continue on for weeks as well. Last time I checked on the GOP numbers, they had about 59%. Rob Axon did tell us that they'd held back ballots over the holidays and hadn't turned them in, and wished kind of they were, so they were getting counted. They also have 21 days after they've been turned into each county clerk that they could be counted. So we won't have those final numbers for quite a few weeks now. I would bet March is when we'd finally have those after they've been pulled off by Better Boundaries. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, they have a statutory deadline in mid-March. So we'll
so
know by then. And you're not seeing much action. I mean, I these things are really hard. I will say the technology is out there that there's no way the GOP doesn't know if they're making it or not. That technology has existed for quite a long time. So you mean
there's a chance we can get you to sign the initiative?
Yeah, there's a chance that I would like you to continue to ask me to sign your initiative. If you're listening and you are a signature gatherer for the campaign, please seek me out. Please let us spend some time together talking about your ballot.
So you think the GOP has a pretty tight handle on their numbers right now?
I think they know they're losing.
They just don't want to say it out loud.
Well, I mean, there's no way they don't know. This technology has been there forever, and they have over $4 million. So I think they know.
So what's their tech? They can see the numbers before they're released from each county?
Well, no, you can just real-time verify. Like back in the olden days.
Because,
you could lie, not lie. Maybe you didn't mean to lie, but you'd say you're registered, and you say you live there, and you say all these things, and you could sign it, and we would have to go back and check the voter file manually before we... Now you can just I can look at your ID. I can actually just type in your name, and I can verify whether you're accurate about it or not.
There's walking apps that any candidate can have.
And candidates use them all the time.
They use them all the time for walking campaigns.
And those just dump in, and you can sync those. Like we would know. The last campaign I ran was in 2018, Medicaid expansion, and the way we were easily having the conversation of refuting or not with the clerks, or that we would just both look at each other's technology and say, here's how we define that. And it was actually nice for the clerk. I think
what happened to that initiative?
Who knows? It's hard to remember. I think if I remember right, that it may have all been amended.
Issue.
Like there's a chance that the legislature tends to amend those measures.
I couldn't resist.
I know, that's fair. I think he's still he knows I did both count my votes. And so I feel like,
hey, come on, count my vote, and I.
You're old friends.
We're old friends.
And either way, whether you're going to sign, not sign, or take your name off, be polite to these kids that are knocking your doors.
Be polite.
Because I hear some horror stories, and we both had kids that have done door-to-door sales.
The worst.
Humans are nasty, so just be nice whether you're going to sign or not sign, and let them go on their way. Maybe you can hold them up for a few minutes, but be nice to them.
For
while
sure,
you hold
occupy
them up.
their time.
Okay, good.
But be nice.
But be nice, please, everyone. A little kindness goes a long way. Partial government shutdown headed our way right now, and it seems like the people that are going to get hit hardest by this are the TSA. It looks like nothing's going to happen before the end of Congress today, and then the Senate has a small vacation, or a big vacation that is coming up, so no votes will happen. I'm personally getting sick of this. Not making decisions and holding people hostage. Maura, any chance that they get this figured out before end of whatever they consider business today? Yeah.
No, I mean, it doesn't look like it. There's so much blame to go around that I'll just give it all to everybody. Congress is broken. September is an artificial deadline now. I wish it was a real deadline. I wish folks would be serious. But I do agree with you. Be nice to all of the airport workers, because these essential workers are what are being bandied about as though they don't matter. And I think that America is really tired of it. The trick is, how and who do we hold accountable for the gridlock? Because the partisanship isn't working. You did it, so I'm doing it. So you did it, so I'm doing it. So you're a sneetch with stars and I'm not. I'm over that. That's not working. So how do we make sure our our elected officials actually do something?
It's becoming increasingly more difficult. When the very first government shutdown in my adult life occurred, it was a major stop the presses.
Huge deal.
And no one wanted to see it. And it was a pox on the heads of the people that were there. Yeah. The more often that we have these, the more it becomes just normal operating procedure. It's unfortunate that Congress isn't getting their act together. It'd be nice to go back to the days. You look at Orrin Hatch and Ted Kennedy. Look at Hubert Humphrey and Barry Goldwater. You look at Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill or Dan Rostenkowski with the Tax Reform Act of '86, and it would be incredible if we could go. Let's have the passionate debates. In my tenure in the Senate, I'd have passionate debates with my Democrat colleagues, and yet found ways to co-sponsor bills with Democrats, and we could find common ground. Well, we're not seeing that in Congress.
I'll go a step further, and one of the reasons I miss you in the Senate is you would have to passionate debate with your Republican colleagues. We should have passionate debate about policy. That's the fun. The fun part is having a passionate debate to get to a better mixed result. And I think until we decide that we are going to vote out people who we may be in alignment with, and we vote in people who we're in alignment with. Again, this is not a party thing. Until we decide that what we want from our members of Congress are results, then we're going to keep getting people who don't care about results.
How about just doing their job?
Right. But meeting a deadline and caring about a deadline. But it will require us to pull.
We have to hold them accountable because we revote them in.
Who we
Maura,
like.
When I say doing their job, constitutionally, what is the primary role
passing the budget?
Passing the appropriations process
September.
and the budget. That is a primary constitutional obligation.
Of the year of the budget.
Of the United States House of Representatives is getting that budget done. When I say do their job, that's what I'm referring to.
You're right. We don't even care. It's the third thing on the news now. It's not even the first, and we're not even freaking out about it. And how do we respond? Well, I say it's your fault, you say it's mine, and then we move on. And So again, it's going to require us taking people that we're in alignment with and saying, I need you to do here's my order of priority. Yes, I care about these other things, but until we decide that fulfilling their constitutional duty of keeping the government working from a budgetary standpoint is our voting action and not all these other things, we're still like, they're mapping to us. They're focusing on what we're telling them to focus on. And until we tell them to focus on this, we're going to get these results.
And this specific piece of the budget, I have a feeling that everyone wants to have it as an issue they can fight about coming up in the congressional races. So how long are they going to hold out for us? So it can be their issue. And I think that's the frustrating part, because there's only a year here and there where we see Congress actually accomplish anything, because there's always an election year. I would like them accomplishing something and just sitting down and solving. And we've talked about it a million times before, that I think both sides really do want to figure out ways for people to come into the country legally, to shut down the border, to figure out DACA. But it's always an issue that will win, or they could fight over an election. So why solve it? So it's just frustrating.
Yeah,
so
administration and governing apparently is boring.
Do you know what would be nice? Boring. Boring sounds so fun to me. Anyone have fun plans this weekend we should know about? Valentine's Day?
I'm doing some mother-in-law things.
Ooh, I love that.
I'm adulting over the weekend. We're going to do that. I'm going to do, and I'm going to move some furniture in my office. So please don't be jealous.
Fun, redecorating.
Don't be jealous. I do think we're doing something fun. My husband's in charge of fun.
I like
think
that.
We're doing something fun tomorrow.
Okay. Are you in charge of fun at your house?
Absolutely. Weather permitting, we're going to take a couple hot air balloons out and
Nice.
Just float on clouds.
Oh, I am going to give another shout out to our friends.
please do.
Tonight I'm going. So our friend Mike Schultz is getting an award for his work on land conservation. So good job, Mike Schultz.
Who's awarding him? Congratulations, speaker.
Mule Deer Association, and I'm going to get it wrong, Sportsman and Outdoor.
Actually, I think what will happen this weekend is recharging batteries. The legislature has, as of
Suck the life out of
today,
you.
there are 14 working days left in the 2026 legislative session.
Thank
14
goodness.
days, and they adjourn, sign, and die.
Yeah, mark your calendars.
And there's 33 working days out of the 45, I believe. So
33 working
33,
days, one of the shortest sessions in the nation, and thank goodness.
yeah, and there's a bill in the amongst of the almost 1,000 bills that have been filed to actually split that up. Our friend for the podcast here, Representative Ryan Wilcox, wants to make it 15-day sessions, 3 of them broken up throughout the year, where they do budget, that's it, where you can concentrate on the money, and then other issues. So, I don't know. We'll see how that goes. We'll keep track of that one and the 900 and whatever else there is there.
I dare say that would be a major step towards moving to a full-time legislature.
Session. I think
and
so,
I don't think the legislature will go for that.
Yeah.
Having testified in legislatures throughout the country as president of the National Conference of State Legislatures, it's not parochial on my part. Looking at the dynamics of virtually every other state legislature, I'll take what we do in Utah over every one of them. Not because I was a 24-year veteran of it, but because we have to get in, we have to focus, we do a budget, we take care of the people's work, the 800, 900,000 bills, 1,600 bills, however many bills are
whatever it takes.
Yeah.
No, but it's limited by time. Time is the ultimate arbiter of how many bills will pass.
Right.
And that has been, people have been complaining about too many bills for the 50 years I've been in Utah. This system,
Now it really is
this,
too many.
this system actually works.
Yeah, I mean, we are holding more special sessions, and we have more ways to get a special session. It used to be very rare. Now it's less rare, but I agree. Right now, I'm still in favor of the 45 days plus a handful of defined. I do worry that our definition of what should go in a special session is getting looser and looser.
Anything that's
Extra
an
special.
emergency.
Yeah, well, now that the legislature gets to be their own boss and call them in.
My emergency.
Right? Well, thank you so much for listening. Tell your friends about us. We will be back here for the final weeks of the legislative session, and give us a review. We will be back again next week.